The sole purpose of this channel is to provide help without any fees or any cost to people struggling in addiction recovery. Some people want to get sober. They don't have the money to hire a sober coach. They don't have adequate insurance that covers their addiction. And they don't have money for aftercare. One of the big, one of the most, one of the biggest reasons why some people do not succeed after they leave treatment is because they don't have the support system. They don't have a plan in place that will guide them for the next several years from addicted to recovered to rehabilitation. I want to make one thing clear. I want to make a very important distinction here on this video that typically you will hear people talk about being in recovery or I'm recovered. I want to make a very important distinction here. Critical understanding is that being recovered is not rehabilitated. N-O-T, not rehabilitated. And so what do I mean by that? I'll take myself, for instance. I got sober and I basically was stabilized by going to treatment. Then after I completed treatment, I went into sober living. My life was stabilized and I had recovered from a state where I will just describe a typical person that goes into addiction treatment is that their life is unmanageable. So you need to go get treated so that you can become stabilized. Okay, once you're treated and you're stabilized, you've recovered, and then you transition to the next phase of rehabilitation, and that's what's called aftercare. Aftercare is generally sober living. That's what's that's what's the most recommended for the next phase of aftercare is either between a year to 2 years of sober living. Some people will say less, but based on my experience and how long it takes to rehabilitate the human mind and the human body, minimum of 1 to 2 years, depending on the degree of addiction with the individual and also depending on the number of obstacles that the individual is facing with their recovery. Some people are faced with extremely difficult obstacles, mental health issues. Some people have PTSD. Some people are very vulnerable because of their unresolved emotional wounds. Their emotional wounds aren't healed, and subsequently, or consequently, they are carrying the burden of heavy emotional baggage. These types of situations require years of reconditioning of the mind to heal from these unfortunate circumstances. So anyway, back to my point about what's the word about not treatment, but sorry, is rehabilitate, not rehabilitation. I'm sorry, very sorry here. I'm not sure why I just lost my train of thought. The word I'm searching for is recovered. Recovered is not rehabilitation. So I'm gonna give you just a quick timeline. So that's those of you who are either new to addiction recovery or um, have been in addiction recovery for less than, say, 2 years. here's a quick, either I could say an analogy, or I could say um, a not tutorial, but orientation. Here's an orientation, a quick, big picture, simplified version of an orientation to addiction recovery. An individual, their life becomes unmanageable because of substance abuse, whether it's drugs or alcohol. Usually tied to that unmanageability and the addiction is people's emotional issues. So you've got instability and insecurities with the individual. So subsequently, people either voluntarily go into addiction treatment or they involuntarily go into addiction treatment. This is the first phase of addiction recovery. It's called treatment. What treatment does, it stabilizes the individual. It's the first phase of recovery. Once the individual completes treatment, treatment can be anywhere from 28 days to 60 days to 90 days. In the ideal case, it's going to be a year to 2 years. After treatment is completed, if it's completed, aftercare is the next phase of addiction treatment and addiction recovery, and the next phase of addiction rehabilitation. Aftercare consists of living in a sober living. It's also known as a halfway house. It is also a component. That's why aftercare. It's still this process, this aftercare process. You are still tied to. You're still working with your treatment program. That's why it's called aftercare, because you're still under the care of your treatment provider. Okay, so typically aftercare lasts anywhere from a few months to a year or two, and sometimes with a comprehensive and truly effective after treatment program, people will stay on aftercare for 3 to 5 years because professional addiction recovery clinicians and doctors know that it can take up to 5 years to fully rehabilitate the mind and body. It can take 3 to 5 years to fully rehabilitate the person. Okay. A important distinction, and I'm going to wrap it up here. It was my reference to my statement that I made that recovery is not rehabilitation, and that recovery is you've been stabilized. It's only that's one. A recovery is a phase of rehabilitation. So just because someone's sober and they're recovered, absolutely, unequivocally does not mean that they are rehabilitated. Critical understanding for the family, the loved ones, and the individual that's working towards long-term sobriety and long-term recovery and ultimately rehabilitation. Is that just because you're sober and just because your life has gained stability does not mean that you're rehabilitated. Look, I am for the sake of not going too long in this video, I'll just say that most of you can either look up what rehabilitated means or you already understand what rehabilitated means. I'll just put it this way. That you've transformed when you're rehabilitated. You've reconditioned your mind, body, and soul. You're a completely different person. And the phase of your addiction and your out of control life or your unmanageable life or your phase of your life where you were addicted at whatever level, that's beyond you and you're no longer addicted. your mind has been transformed, it's been reconditioned. The addiction is a phase of your life, and um, you're far beyond addiction because you're rehabilitated. Anyway, um, of course, some people will perhaps misunderstand what I'm saying, and they may come to some judgment of what I'm saying, or they may not agree what I'm saying. The sole purpose of this video and my channel and the 12-step work that I do is it. I share my life experience. It took me, because I never received adequate treatment. I never crossed paths with people that could provide me, the person who was willing to go to any length to stay sober. I was never provided with a high level of care and never crossed paths with anyone who could break down addiction, what it means to be addicted, how to heal from your addiction, how to learn to heal your emotional wounds, and subsequently learn how to shed the burden of your emotional baggage. I'm simply just sharing my experience, and some of you who are watching this may not agree with me, but what I'm doing is I'm contributing what helped me, and I'm sharing my experiences, and your experiences may differ. So this is an individual sharing his experience and what's helped him. And what I can say is that I struggled to learn how to not relapse over 10 years. And right now, as of December 30th, I have over 4 years of continuous sobriety. And what I'll share with you is that my mind and my body have healed from my addiction. It took me approximately 2 years for my body to recalibrate, to recondition, to get to a reconditioned state, and to move to the next phase where my mind and my body were healed, and therefore my brain was no longer hijacking my addiction was no longer hijacking my mind. So after 2 years, because my brain healed and my mind was no longer hijacked by the addiction, I subsequently saw so many things of why I struggled and how I crippled myself with self-sabotaging behaviors, how I crippled myself with self-sabotaging thoughts and emotions. And what I can share with you right now is that unequivocally, I have healed my emotional wounds, subsequently shed the heavy burden of my emotional baggage, and I'm now living a life where I could describe as happy, joyous, and free. I go for months and months without any anger, without any past aggressive agitation. I go for months of being content, and the challenges in my life today that pop up are now unique opportunities where, because I see things so much differently, I can work through the challenges in my daily life in such a healthier and faster way. So I would say that I have received the miracle of recovery. I've received the miracle of being reborn. And therefore, if I don't continue to share what I've learned, that more than likely what will happen is that the old way of living, old way of thinking will gradually return to me, because I've taken for granted that I can easily go back to the old way without uh, without continuing to work in my recovery by giving back to the community. In other words, my primary purpose is to stay sober and help others who are struggling. So, last thing I'll wrap here is the disclaimer. Not everyone's going to see eye to eye with my assessments. Not everyone's going to agree, but what I'm doing is I'm sharing what I learned. And here's the reason. If I had crossed paths with people, with someone that knows what I know now, I was willing to take direction, but I never crossed paths with people that could help me take my challenges in life, my struggles, where I was crippling myself, and guide me to help me understand how these can be, how life's problems, how life's adversities can be teachable moments. So, for instance, I have learned to use forgiveness and the serenity prayer. Forgiveness has been such an amazing tool that I didn't know how I could apply forgiveness in my life. And today I know how forgiveness works and I apply forgiveness on a regular basis. So anyway, I'm going to include a link in this video description. It may not be on today. This is the 20th of March, 2019, but here in a couple of days, I will add the link. I was featured on the Danny Johnson show, and she did a quick interview, and I broached the subject of some other topics and some other tidbits regarding my recovery. So I will provide the link in the notes of this video to my appearance on the Danny Johnson show. I also have a website, sobersherpa.com, and also Sober Sherpa Live, but that won't be live for probably a year or two. Anyway, thanks so much. This is akaTGIF. I'm on Instagram, akaTGIF, akaTGIF, TGIF, and that is for my Athletes in Recovery page. And my main Instagram page is Sober Sherpa username. Thanks so much. Everybody turn this off. Oh, here we go.